I saw this meme the other day on Twitter and I had to do a double take because I was like, holy shit, there's no way. Upon closer inspection, I realized it was a joke. The subtext obviously says, quote, "Thank you for winning worlds." Good joke. Definitely didn't shorten my lifespan by 5 years. For those that know me know I'm a huge Zeus fan, so you can imagine my absolute despair when I read the real news today. Earlier this week, Korean esports powerhouse T1 began revealing its contract renewals and releases following their second Worlds title in 3 years. Firstly, we saw the release of Reckless. His statement is on the screen. You can pause this if you'd like to read it. Initially, this was a shock, but upon learning about his opportunity to play back in Europe with Caedrel's new team, Los Ratones, it made a lot more sense. Next was the renewal of support genius Keria on a multi-year contract. Keria was the first we saw of the existing roster remaining, other than Faker, whose contract expires on the 17th of November in 2025. Basically another year remaining from today. But as Faker is also part owner of T1, I honestly can't really ever see him leaving unless he's given a record-breaking offer elsewhere. His father and Faker have also said that they'd like him to play into his 30s, so there's that as well. Next came the departure of Roach of the coaching staff, as he is to fulfill military service duty, as he recounts in his statement here. Then, T1 announced the re-signing of the next piece of the puzzle, the Jungle King Owner. Owner will be rejoining as part of a multi-year contract and had this to say in his statement. Following this was the release of Dal, the T1 Academy top laner, and then a day later, T1 Gumayusi was announced, but only for a single-year contract. He speaks on the re-signing here. Then came the release of coaching staff GBM. But where was the rest of ZOFGK? As each of the aforementioned main roster announcements were made apart, with Keria beginning on the 14th of November, Owner on the 15th, Guma on the 17th, and Faker remaining, surely Zeus was to come next. Now I need to preface, this situation is still developing, but I'll be sure to keep you updated as it progresses, so be sure to subscribe to not miss out, because believe me, after this video, there is going to be a lot more about this in the next few days. Blood is going to be spilled. Just a few hours ago, T1 announced the release of 2023 Worlds MVP top laner Zeus. Obviously, the community was in shock, and this news didn't come without controversy. Now, obviously, there's no actual sources available. There's no spokesperson from T1 or anything just yet, because this is so early. This is all from internals and potentially even hearsay, so take it with a grain of salt. But I'm going to try and cross-reference the rumors floating around about this. I also want to preface that because they're about to be mentioned a lot, it's meant to be said, again, not confirmed, but Zeus's agent is owned by Lico Sports, who also work with Keen. This will come into play later. They have different individual people as representatives, but the actual agency is apparently the same, thus providing a mutual interest and leverage in certain negotiation situations. So firstly, let's look at the Naver article because it's Korean sourced. In these statements, it says that following their Worlds victory, T1 initiated contract discussions with each player led by T1 CEO Ahn Woon-gi and director Jong Hoi-yoon. Keria's renewal was finalized first, shortly followed by Owner and Gumayusi. And to segue before I begin recounting, what I think makes this a really specific roster situation is obviously the fanbase's ties to the ZOFGK brand. Firstly, it looks a lot cooler than DOFGK, and if you're confused by that acronym, make sure to keep watching. But secondly, the marketing surrounding the World's journeys of this roster over the last 3 years was incredible and really tied the players and fans together with a sense of unity. At this point, T1 is almost more ZOFGK than it is T1. From the lows of being reverse swept by DRX in 2022 to the highs of rinsing 2023 and the underdog tale of a 4th seed winning it all in 2024, there isn't much T1 hasn't seen lately. And this is all while being tied in with the legacy of Faker, the greatest esport athlete to ever live. So to break this roster is so much more than just a simple roster change. The statement goes on saying the T1 fans strongly voiced their desire to retain ZOFGK, but despite the momentum from fans, negotiations with Zeus and specifically his management faced significant hurdles. T1 reported 3 proposals, with the last offer including a slight salary increase and a 3+1 year contract term, really highlighting the organization's commitment to a long-term partnership with Zeus. This point also ties into something else I'm about to share, but I'll get to that after this statement. We have lots to go. However, disagreements persisted over salary and contract duration. It goes on to say when Zeus's contract ended and he entered free agency, he received multiple competitive offers from many teams. A final meeting was planned on the morning of the 19th, but was postponed due to a request from Zeus's representative. According to that representative, quote, "That meeting that morning was never officially confirmed. We had only intended to communicate at that time. We submitted our final proposal to T1, but there was no positive feedback. T1 made significant efforts to bridge the gap. The difference in contract duration remained unresolved, however. T1 proposed a 1 year or 1+1 year term, but Zeus's team held firm at 2 years. After the representative's 3 PM deadline passed without resolution, Zeus accepted an offer with another team. In the next slide, it says that even with division and the meeting postponed, negotiations continued through other forms of communication, and T1 sought to communicate with Zayas directly. T1 continued to narrow down contract differences, but a decision was made before the differences were dissolved. Zayas' agent said, quote, "In the initial negotiations, we never made a counter-offer regarding the annual salary. The amount initially proposed by T1 was a condition that we could not accept, and although we ended up receiving a slightly increased amount than this year's annual salary right before free agency, we continuously conveyed to T1 from the beginning that we would not negotiate further, but we would receive a market evaluation." They continued, "We told T1 that the deadline for this offer was 3 p.m, and eventually waited until T1's response at 3:40 p.m. The money amount was similar, but there was still a difference in contract duration. T1's perception of events reads, quote, "Even though we were unilaterally informed of a 3 p.m. deadline, we rushed to Incheon to continue negotiations," which is where Zayas lived, and they wanted to meet him in person, "but we received a rejection from the agent." The closing paragraph reads, "Eventually Zayas accepted an offer from somewhere other than T1 after 3:40 p.m. Perhaps it was he was reluctant to accept a one-year offer. T1 arrived at the negotiation site after 4 p.m, but the deadline was passed and Zayas had already accepted another offer." According to a commenter under the post, which links back to what I said before, Zayas and Keen are represented by the same agency and adds to the situation. The commenter says, "Rumours. They let Keen re-sign in the morning, and because Keen was off the market, it meant they could charge way more for Zayas, as obviously the demand for a good top laner just went up. Quote, "This actually matches why Zayas' side didn't show up for the morning meeting. T1 is really angry." They describe this as a, quote, "grey area in the law." I'm again going to reiterate, all of this is information through translation, multiple sources that vary in levels of credibility. These are just what's found flying around on Korean forums and outlets, so take it with a grain of salt. Directly following Zayas' departure post on T1 LOL, the signing of Doran was announced, another very high profile top laner, but with mixed reception to say the least.
And they're scared of Bin getting checks.
Right now, I feel like their mega
Dorman,
range is...
what?
What?
What the fuck was that?
Most of what I just spoke about also cross-checks with this translated excerpt from an interview on FM Korea. I wanted to summarize this, but because it's a translation, I think it's important I don't, so I'm just going to dictate it. You can pause and read it if you'd like to, but I'll just read it out for you. T1 had a finalized verbal agreement, but the agent delayed things, saying they'd match T1's maximum offer and would let me know before finalizing the individual contract. However, instead of proceeding, the agent stalled to make more money, saying negotiations should resume on the 19th when Zayas enters free agency. This delay raised suspicions, especially when Hanwha also offered a slightly higher deal, less than 500 million Korean won difference, which is roughly 350k USD. During this time, T1, after staying quiet, reconnected with Hanwha, and it became known that the agent had been in contact with Hanwha as well. Ultimately, Doran's agent was called and a quick agreement was made. T1 initially aimed to rebrand with Faker as the central figure, meeting the players' desired conditions and signing multi-year contracts. However, Zayas' agent had been operating in a very grey area legally, linking back to what I said before, which creates a mess for everyone. T1 now plans to gather evidence of these illegal activities and send a formal notice of proof. Currently, T1's financial situation seems very complicated. The branding around Faker has taken a hit, and merchandise plans, assumedly ZOFGK based stuff, is being cancelled, which leads to millions in lost revenue. There's even talks of blocking the agent. Arn, representing T1, has been very vocal, saying they won't tolerate this situation. It's clear this has become a very contentious issue. Rather than blocking things outright, I wish the agent had acted with more care. They scrapped their original plans and sought market evaluations, but they didn't place a competitive bid or finalise the deal. Now the same unresolved problems remain. T1 is trying to build a case, cancel the contracts and distance themselves from the agent. Despite being a different company, the agent seems to be causing issues across the board. T1 intends to reveal these issues to the public, likely resulting in news coverage and serious legal issues, linking back to the aforementioned gathering of evidence. T1 originally planned to make Faker the central figure of their rebranding while meeting the players' desired conditions and contract terms, including multi-year deals. They verbally agreed and worked out most of the details, including maximizing their offer and getting player approval. However, plans B and C fell apart, causing internal chaos among T1 staff. The link to what I just spoke about, to the direct media, is in the description below if you want to check it out yourself, if you can read Korean, because I can't. I also found this, which was a removed post from rlol, sharing more on the situation. I'm going to repeat myself a couple times, because there's a few consistencies here, obviously, but I think I should keep them in anyway. Again, keep in mind these sources aren't officiated. Zayas and Keen are managed by two different agencies, but only on paper. They're technically not, which highlights potential collusion. T1 had a verbal agreement to sign Zayas, but the agency bluffed and asked T1 for a ridiculously high amount of money to buy time. T1 asked the agency to let them know what their intentions are before Keen re-signs, so that T1 can grab him if they don't get Zayas. The agency then ghosted T1 until after Keen re-signed to Gen.G. When negotiations began on November 19th, T1 had the intention of spending more to keep Zeus, as it meant keeping the Zeto FGK brand intact. The agency then told T1 that HLE offered more, but it wasn't even 400k more and ghosted T1. After being, quote, mental boomed by the conduct of the agency, T1 quickly contacted Doran's agent and signed him smoothly. T1 always wanted to retain Zeto FGK. To do this, they were ready to give players whatever they wanted and multi-year contracts. Zeus' agent walked a fine line between legal and illegal, the grey area, which was to screw T1 over, so all of T1 is really heated about the situation. T1 will now be gathering evidence. T1 is enraged and is in vengeance mode. They will contact TV stations, find whatever they can to sue these guys. T1 intended to brand around Zeto FGK to be the successor of Faker. T1 had a verbal agreement and was finalizing it, but that and Plan B and C were foiled. T1 has lost the Zeto FGK brand, had merch cancelled, and are in a nothing left to lose blood campaign against Zeus' agency. The T1 COO swears on his name that they will never forgive them. Again, for the 10th time this video, this stuff is from forums, outlets, and online, Korean or English media, so take it with a grain of salt, but it is suspicious to me how many of these details do line up. However, despite all of this, T1 Doran is currently signed, and Zeus, according to all of this, has accepted another team. As I said before, this situation is still developing. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in another video. Bye!